Hi, friends. I'm Scott Giles, a diplomate of the National Guild of Hypnotists, a certified hypnocoach, and so on and so on. Thank you for joining me for this Facebook Live video, and I will later download it and put it on my YouTube channel. This video is going to be a little bit longer than the 5 or 10 minute videos I typically do here Saturday afternoons, because I want to talk about something that requires fuller development. It's mostly going to be of interest to my hypnotic colleagues, but everyone is welcome to view it. What I want to talk about is the Satanic Ritual Abuse panic that took place worldwide in the 1980s and 90s, and how some hypnotists got swept up into it, and what it was like to be a hypnotist in Chicago who did not buy in to this hoax. Now, what was it? The Satanic Panic was started in about the 1980s and went worldwide by the 1990s. It was a conviction that there was a group of wealthy, elite people, powerful people, who were involved in a worldwide satanic cult in which children were abducted, babies bred for a living sacrifice, pornography, prostitution was involved. There were women who were forced to breed. They were called breeders, in fact, or that's what they were cited as. They would give birth to infants in clandestine birthing rooms and hospitals, and then these babies, for which there was no record, could be sacrificed to Satan. It was the belief that some people kept intensive care medical bays in their basements so that they could have these breeders give birth, or they could use them for other malevolent purposes, and that there were clandestine crematoriums to dispose of the bodies. And fantastic as all of this may sound, there were a lot of people in the mental health community who believed it passionately. And what they believed was that this whole worldwide conspiracy was being kept secret by the fact that its ringleaders were powerful world leaders, and that hypnosis was routinely used by this cult to create people as multiple personalities, what we now call the dissociative identity disorder, so that when they were engaged in the prostitution and then sometimes the ritual sacrifice and all of that, they were in one personality, and then they would snap into another personality and they wouldn't remember what they had done. That was the belief. Initial publicity came via the book in 1980, Lawrence Presiter's Michelle Remembers, where supposedly a woman recovered memories of such experiences. People were arrested and convicted on the claim that they were involved in this cult. The McMartin Daycare Center, there was a belief that the suburban daycare centers were hotbeds for this activity, and the wholesale abuse of children was going on in them, and then the children would be hypnotized not to tell their parents, and so on and so on and so on. I live in Chicagoland, and Chicago was a hotbed for this material, this belief. It was centered around the Dissociative Disorders program of Rush Medical Center, led by a psychiatrist and a psychologist. Now, I'm not going to name them. If you're interested in them, it's not going to be hard with a Google search to track them down. The reason I'm not is because there were people in the Chicago area, in the mental health community, that I respect a great deal, who were working alongside these people, but were not involved in the same way. And I don't want to say something that might cause their reputations to come into question by association. But the irony of this is that the psychiatrist who was involved in all of this was actually one of my early instructors in the hypnotic arts and sciences. Now, I studied with him before he got involved with all of this, as I sometimes say, before he fell off the planet. But I just kind of watched powerlessly as this stuff went down all over the Chicago area. What they were doing to the people in their dissociative disorders clinic is people would come to their for treatment for depression or anxiety, something, a common cold of mental health. And they would persuade these people that they were actually victims of this satanic cult and that there were multiple personalities and that they should sign themselves into the inpatient dissociative disorders clinic at the hospital. Once in there, my understanding, and I was never in it myself, so I can't verify this, but I've heard it from a lot of sources, that they were actually practicing what's called narco-hypnosis, which is hypnosis amplified by the use of hypnotic drugs, Demerol, fentanyl, pentanol, and so on. Also, because they were inpatients, they were put into what's called a token economy. If you agreed with what the doctor was saying, you got privileges. And if you disagreed with what the doctor was saying, privileges were taken away. This was basically a form of brainwashing. Now, the claim was that this cult used hypnosis to turn victims into multiple personalities so that they could do all of these crimes and not tell anyone. That the secret was absolutely kept. If you're interested, what finally happened when all of this was completely debunked, Rush Medical Center ended up paying one of the largest malpractice settlements in American history. Both the psychiatrist and the psychologist lost their licenses. And I don't know what's happened to the psychiatrist, but I do know what's happened to the psychologist. She became a hypnotist. And my understanding is she's practicing. I don't believe she's a member of the guild. I made it clear to guild leadership as chairman of the ethics committee, I would have very strong feelings if she ever became a member. But what she's doing as a hypnotist in her independent practice is, wait for it, alien abductions. Yeah, instead of telling people that their problems result from the fact that they were abused as children by a satanic cult, she now tells them that the real problem is because they were abducted by aliens and traumatized and don't remember it. Yeah. To give you a chance to see for yourself how bad this is, I'd like to invite you to go to my website and into the download directory. My website is csgiles.org. C as in Charles, my first name, S as in Scott, my middle name, and then my last name, giles.org. And in the download directory, I have posted for you the Greenbaum speech. The Greenbaum speech is a long speech. This is a transcript given by Dr. Corydon Hammond, another person who was heavily involved in proclaiming that this worldwide satanic conspiracy existed. Dr. Hammond is actually a former president of the American Society for Clinical Hypnosis, the organization that opposes the National Guild of Hypnotists, claiming that we don't know what we're doing. Well, I want you to read the dreck that he was preaching back then, and see how fantastical it is. And you actually look at that document. I want to also add that any chapter of the National Guild of Hypnotists that would like to use this video in an educational way for their members, you have my permission to do so. You don't have to get hold of me, but definitely download the Greenbaum speech and you'll get an eyeful. So there was this worldwide cult. That was the belief. That was the Satanic Ritual Abuse Panic. Now, every so often I'll encounter a colleague who will say, well, look, I had a client who remembers being engaged in activities that were horrible like this. They were dark and they were satanic. And I have no doubt that that's true. Let me talk about what the Satanic Ritual Abuse is not. And let me also add that some of you are going to say, well, how do you know about this, Giles? Well, bear in mind, I'm a clergyman. I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister in full and final fellowship, holding an accredited doctoral degree. I've studied religious anthropology. And in religious anthropology, we often look at the most extreme cases where trends tend to be exaggerated because it makes them easier to discern. There are the Afro-Caribbean religions. They started in Africa with an Aboriginal religion called Ifa, and came to Cuba and Haiti and South America and in the United States as part of the slave trade. Now, these religions have some things that are dark in them. I'm talking about Voodoo, Santeria, and the other Caribbean religions like Ubanda, Candomblé. If you're curious, you can look these up. There's even one really dark one called Palamacambale that actually uses human remains as part of their ritual. But these are religious movements that are quite public and certainly not the worldwide conspiracy of the elite, far from it. There are, in fact, groups that call themselves Satanists today. There are two big ones and probably some smaller ones. The first is the Church of Satan, based in Poughkeepsie, New York, and the other is the very politically active Satanic Temple based in Salem, Massachusetts. When you hear about Satanists putting Christmas decorations in the state capitals, that's the Satanic Temple doing that. The two organizations don't much like each other, but the important thing to get is that they don't believe that the devil exists, and they don't worship anyone. They're atheists. They don't believe God exists either. They simply use the satanic imagery as a symbol, a metaphor for independence and how do I want to say this? For independence and being kind of in your face, a certain kind of creative arrogance. These organizations are not the worldwide secret satanic conspiracy, far from it. They, in fact, have websites, they give lectures, they put YouTube videos up of their ceremonies, hardly a secret thing. There are also a group of people who call themselves theistic Satanists. I actually think that's probably a misnomer. They're devil worshippers, not theistic Satanists. As far as I'm concerned, if you're Satanist, you're an atheist. But these groups, they have a variety of names. They do, in fact, believe that there's a supernatural power of Satan, and they do, in fact, try to worship that savior. But again, this is not a secret group. You can go find their YouTube videos, and they publicize their activities. Then you're going to find that there are individual self-radicalized devil worshippers out there. For example, the criminal gang called MS-13. There are certain parts of that actually claim to worship the devil because they believe that will give them protection from arrest, and they do human sacrifice. And in the Mexico area, there's the whole cult of Santa Muerte, the female saint of murder that a lot of the narcos are involved with. And all of this stuff is very, very dark. But none of these are the so-called worldwide organized conspiracy in the Satanic Panic. So, what was it like to be a hypnotist practicing in the Chicago area when all this was going down? Well, first, I never brought into this claim. I was suspicious almost immediately. The reason being is I am a clergyman. I have served parishes and so on. And I know the amount of infrastructure it takes to support a religious organization. And the amount of infrastructure that would be required to have these ICU units and basements and these satanic rituals would be enormous. You couldn't keep it secret. Human beings are not that precise and not that good about keeping secrets. For example, let's assume you decide you want to build an intensive care unit in your basement, and somehow you have the money to do that. Let's assume that you have also a way to do it without it being discovered by your plumber, your electrician, your house cleaning service, your exterminator, and all of that. You're not going to be able to buy the equipment on Amazon. Medical device providers know who they're selling to, and they ask questions. Such an installation could not run on 110-volt household current. You're going to have special kinds of electrical services involved. You're going to have vacuum generators. There are going to have to be regular oxygen deliveries. You're going to have a large pharmacy of medication available to you, all of which is prescription and all of which is tightly regulated. It would be completely implausible that any human organization big enough to do all of that would be able to hide itself perfectly from human view so that we only see the victims. As an example, let's take a secret organization we all know exists, the Mafia. It's a secret society, and if you talk, they kill you. There's no question about that. I think the secret is omerta, the closed mouth. Yet, if you go into any police department in any city, you're going to find the detectives have a pretty fair idea of who's in the Mafia. They even probably know what kind of rank they hold. They probably know how they're making their money, although they may not be able to prove that in a court of law. And there are people who talk, who come out, who give testimony. There are convictions, and these people live to tell the tale because they go off into witness protection programs. Nothing like that has ever happened with this supposed worldwide satanic conspiracy. In my denomination, it takes us 10 years and 3 public fights to bring out a new hymnal. It's preposterous that you could have a religious organization this vast, as has been proposed by the Satanic Ritual Abuse Panic, and not have parts of it somehow become visible. Another thing to think about is false memory. We know now, and I think the National Guild is very, very good about training its people to beware of accidentally creating false memories when doing hypnotic regressions. Memory is intrinsically constructive. You don't remember what happened, you remember what you think happened. And it's possible to alter those. Sometimes when I'm doing training for the Guild, I will demonstrate how easy it is to create a false memory by just taking a volunteer from the class and using only conversation. No trance work at all, just talk. I'll program in a false memory of being terrorized by a green clown in childhood. It's not hard to do. I've done it many times. In fact, I did it at the last Solid Gold convention. False memories are easy to create and become quite durable once they're created. And if you're using things like drugs and reinforcement and so on, and you actually are using hypnosis, wow, it's going to be created very powerfully. So a lot of the people who identify themselves as ritual abuse victims actually are suffering from a false memory, in some cases deliberately created by a mental health professional who wanted to boost the fee. Instead of treating you for anxiety or depression, they get you into their inpatient clinic and the cash register rings to a couple of $100,000 in your insurance policy. So that's what it was all about. And gradually people realized that that the claims being made were ridiculous. No evidence was found, no piles of bones were found, no hidden crematoriums were found, no ritual chambers were found. I mean, think about it. If you had an organization like that, you'd have to have people writing rituals, sewing vestments, making ritual equipment. You couldn't keep it secret. Human beings just aren't that good at keeping secrets. And to believe that this satanic cult exists, you would have to believe that the secrecy was perfect. Not one person ever squealed. All we see are the victims. And I just don't believe that. And most other people who have investigated this matter came to the same conclusions. But this stuff lives on. You know about the Pizzagate, the Cod Ping Pong Pizzeria in Washington, where the claims were made that the Democrats were running a child pornography business, and there were, I think, claims also of the infant sacrifice and the satanic cult and all of that. No substance to it. But yet people believed it enough that someone went in there and shot the place up. So these things can catch on, the classic witch panic, like we saw in colonial America and Salem. So be careful when you explore these things that you don't get yourself swept up in it. An awful lot of my colleagues did. I would attend meetings of hypnosis organizations, and there would be presentations given by hypnotists who claimed to have multiple personalities as their clients, and the satanic cult was creating them and triggering them to commit suicide so they wouldn't talk by special patterns and flower arrangements and all kinds of really ridiculous things. But it was everywhere at the time. Now, I'm a lifetime member of the Association of Professional Chaplains. That organization was created by the merger of two other organizations, one of which was the Association of Mental Health Clergy, of which I was a certified member. Because I was a member of the Association of Mental Health Clergy, I would typically attend mental health counselors' events because that organization was also an affiliate of the American Psychiatric Association. And I was, well, this gives you an idea what it was like. I was attending a meeting of the Illinois Mental Health Counselors Association, meeting right in St. Charles, Illinois, and it was at the banquet. And I mentioned that I practice hypnosis, and all of a sudden everyone started to talk to me about this ritual abuse thing, but they all believed it. And I said, if even 10% of what these people are saying is true, we have a tremendous problem. And I said that, yeah, if even 10% is true, we have a problem, but 10% isn't true. None of it's true. Silence. And then every person at the table I was sitting in physically turned their chair around so that I was looking at the back of 8 heads. They would not make eye contact with me. They would not look at me. They would not talk to me. That's what it was like. I would often get referrals from psychotherapists who were convinced that their clients were ritual victims, and would I regress them and unearth the abuse? Well, I would do a careful regression, and there was nothing there, and I would send it back to the therapist, saying, nothing there. And the therapist would say, well, there has to be. They were convinced of it. And I'm sure they sent the patient somewhere else to someone who would tell them what they wanted to hear. But it was a difficult, difficult time to maintain one's personal integrity in the face of that much collegial back pressure. And before the hoax was really obvious, the major medical center was backing it. And so people believed because it was coming with that kind of authority. Not millions probably, but thousands of people were injured by this. People went to jail, careers were ruined. All of that's happened. So we have to be very careful when we do our hypnotic regressions to not create false memories. And if a client tells you one impossible thing, well, maybe, but if they tell you two, probably not. Hey, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. I'll be back next Saturday at 2:30 Central Time with another talk back to the usual length. I'm going to be talking about forgiveness and a major theme for we clergy types, and I think you'll find it is useful. I appreciate it very much, and thanks for your attention.